Hello and welcome to the Hypertrophy Odyssey, chapter 314. It is the second day of the week, aka the Special Beam Cannon workout. I am feeling pretty good right now. I'm actually feeling way better than I thought I would be, so it's very nice. But anyways, to the main subject matter at hand. Good and Evil Part 2. Now, yes, this has been a while since I've gone back to this subject matter. This is something that I've been talking to my coworker about randomly, and I wanted to kind of continue on the series because I was curious about it and I was thinking about it today. And I guess from the first episode where we looked at yin and yang and the idea that there is a little bit of one in the other and how synergistically they work together in pushing the universe forward, let's be real. I'll probably come back to yin and yang and look at a more deeper philosophical approach that Taoism uses to discuss it and how they see it as. I think that's a different story in essence, because that was just the intro of it and I wanted to dive deeper into it. But today's episode is going to be looking more into the idea of where everything is in the spectrum of good and evil. Obviously, there are levels to it weirdly, like the evil of, stealing candy from a baby is different than complete murder. It's like a big difference between that and also on the other side from what would be 10 out of 10 goodness, which would be technically Jesus Christ. One would be giving a homeless man a quarter. There are levels to it, obviously. And unfortunately, I don't want to think of it like that too much because I don't like the idea of spectrums. Unfortunately, there are certain groups in today's modern society that have ruined scales for everything else because now it reminds me of them. So unfortunately, it's a little tough to even think of it like that. But I would like to have the idea of where are you in terms of good and bad? And there are definitive ideas of what is good and what is bad. You know what I mean? And I think that'll be kind of I think this episode is going to be exploring the extremes of it. Obviously, there is no turning back from these types of extremes, because I think that that's probably easier to establish on either side rather than trying to find out what the middle ground is, because obviously that's when it starts getting a little funky. But at the ends and then going up to a certain point, I feel like most people can kind of agree upon that these are the end points of one or the other. Obviously, nobody's going to be Jesus Christ, of course, but at the same time, there is some level of the virtues that are there that can help us get an idea of what is at the end of good and what is at the end of evil is relatively simple. What's interesting is, and I'll talk about this more in the voiceover, but is the fact that we know very easily and very well through all of human society, through all of the literature, texts, and everything else, what goes in the evil side. We know categorically how it goes. I mean, there are multiple stories. The idea of the Dante's Inferno just showing each circle of hell as he progresses deeper and deeper into it, and we know it how it is. In the Divine Comedy as the backbone for this, the middle part, the Purgatory. Purgatory has its own levels as well, which is in the center of between heaven and hell. But that's kind of a different story for a different day. And then we have heaven, in which in the book they describe somewhat, but they kind of leave it vague in the sense that no one really understands it per se. There are levels to it, but not nearly as much as, say, hell. So it's interesting to me that we kind of innately understand one side more than the other side, which is interesting to me. And I think that just says a lot, even when looking at all of the series that I've done about the 7 virtues and the 7 deadly sins, you can see that the sins are very direct and you can understand them relatively quickly when you hear them, versus the virtues, they're more of a metaphysical concept almost in certain aspects of it. It's not necessarily just you. It is just you in theory in all of them, but there are certain influences that are just kind of missing there that could help you out, rather than the other way around where the 7 deadly sins, you can easily go run through them in like a 24-hour period easily and and with great succession. Let's be real. So it's a little bit more interesting in that concept. The one takes no willpower, the other one takes a lot of willpower to get all of them in. So I wanted to just kind of look at it from that perspective, good and evil, and just looking at it like that and understanding where the extremes are, and then we'll come back and then see where that goes. But with that being said, I'll see you on Mother Base.
All right, so started this day off with squats, which were okay, I guess. But anyways, back to the main subject matter at hand. Good and Evil Part 2. The extremes or levels. Well, this is something that I'll probably come back to later on in different episodes, but I wanted to look at the extremes of both sides. And I also wanted to clarify one thing that I found that past me was doing in mistake, which was saying good and bad, which is incorrect. I would like to say it's good and evil, because I feel like there is a distinguishing factor when discussing good and evil and good and bad, because good and bad is a little bit more of a different entity in itself when describing things that aren't necessarily good, right, when it comes to bad. But in the scale of the world, we would want to think of it as evil, because evil is more of a metaphysical concept. I feel like more people kind of understand better than bad, because bad is slightly subjective in a certain sense. I don't like that terminology rather than just saying it is evil. But anyways, looking at both sides, and I thought about this for a little bit, and trying to understand what are the extremes of both sides. If we were to look at what is 100% good, aka the most good that you can be, it is very simple in comparison to looking at the most evil. If we look at the most good that you can be, it is what would be considered Jesus Christ in theory. If we were to look at it from a morally objective viewpoint, this would be the ultimate perfect being who did nothing but good for the world. That's if we're looking at it in that scope. But if we aren't looking into that scope, and then in the sense that who would it be like? It would be some type of person that exonerates the same style of ideal. It would be the extreme for good if you aren't religious at all. It's still the ideal of Jesus Christ, but maybe not necessarily him, but the ideals that he may have gone forth with are what would be considered the extreme on the good side of things. Then when we take a look at the other side of it, the most evil, the extreme level of evil, I'm using something along the lines of like the Divine Comedy, Dante's Inferno, we can look at what was considered the worst of the worst in all of humanity. It was in the ninth circle of hell, which is the innermost circle, which unlike the other ones, which were usually some type of punishment that was like fire and brimstone or something along those lines, this was a frozen lake with Satan in the center, and the people that they would see was Judas, Brutus, and Cassius as well. So it's interesting to think that even back in the day, the innermost circle, which was for betrayal, great betrayers of the world, you can understand that it's like as if we understood back in those days that the greatest good was this person, aka Jesus Christ, and the complete opposite of that would be Judas, the ultimate betrayer of what is essentially all-knowing good. So it is interesting that even to this day, betrayers are something that will cut us deep, and we know that it is something that will cut us deep no matter how hard we try. And I'm not going to go into like what that means, and because of course there are levels to it, and I just wanted to look at the extreme levels of this in particular when looking at good and who's evil. Does this mean that there's only a way to look at good and evil through a biblical or a religious way? And that is not necessarily accurate, but also at the same time, it does help establish in a story idea or ideal of what is good and evil. I think it's a good representation of what would be all good and what is the evil that incarnates all evil. And I think that that is the most interesting part about using something like religion in order to understand good and evil in those senses and terms, because then you can understand that fundamentally, if you don't look at, let's say, this story of the Bible as a way to understand good and evil, you can look at the story and understand that the ultimate good was betrayed, and the betrayer of the ultimate good is the ultimate evil. And I think that you can understand that inherently, and you can people can understand it when looking at things, when things are usually the people who are gunned down or have some type of goodwill of a person gets tragically like ended or something along those lines because of somebody who was close to them ended up betraying them. And you can see it as that person fundamentally is the root of their evil and of all of the evils in theory of the world. So it's an interesting balance between the two. When using these examples as extremes for good and evil, I think it's good because then it establishes where we can go from there inward a little bit more and establishing it into a more modern context, even though certain aspects of this will forever be there no matter where we are in humanity.
And we're back. Welcome to the workout debriefing. Exercises not filmed, none. Exercises skipped, also none. Got everything in, thankfully. But anyways, back to the main subject matter at hand. Good and Evil Part 2. So this series is probably going to take a lot of twists and turns, probably going to be very extended, go back, go forth, really look in depth in certain areas of each part and each section. Today I just wanted to lay out kind of a landscape of looking at, generally speaking, good and evil and what that may or may not entail on each side when it comes to the extremes, at least, because I feel like it's easier to understand the extremes of each side on one end or the other realistically, because it's not that crazy of a thing to understand. I think we have enough hindsight from the past in order to figure out whether or not, or ascertain whether or not something is good and bad. And I think that that has been established within us in quite some time. And there are other things that are probably something along the lines of evil as well, and or good as well, that we can see from outside sources as well, like let's say animals and things like that may be able to sense those things. But that's kind of a different part in its entirety, really, because we'll get to that when we get to that. But for today, I just wanted to talk about the ranges that could be considered one thing or the other, something that where at the end of the day we can kind of all agree, hey, you're probably evil if you're doing these things, and the other way around, you're probably good if you're doing these things. So I think that it's good to put it in perspective in that sense, and then try to work your way backwards from there, because I feel like once it starts getting closer and closer to the middle, that's when you start getting a little bit murky, right? And it's a little tough, but I would like to define those murky waters. But in order to get there, you kind of want to see the clear water first, certain things that are kind of obvious to anybody, really, and then go from there. I think that this was a good start, and we'll see where this entire subject matter goes, because like I said, this is kind of weird. My brain is really wrapped around the concepts of good and evil and seeing where it goes, and understanding the establishments that will happen between either way, just because it's a very curious thing to happen. With that being said, tell me what you think in the comments section down below. I'd love to know your thoughts and opinions about this one. This one was more of a random one, but still one that is continuing on a series that I really do enjoy. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Please share this video with anybody who may or may not like it. I will be back on tomorrow with a new video. Thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I will see you in the next one. Keep it heavy. Stay safe out there. Stay cool. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.